Hi, everybody, and welcome back to our latest episode of Buttertorts, a truly Canadian legal podcast. Today, joining me, I have Charles Gluckstein, who many of you already know. And we're really excited to bring on two people from Filevine, and we'll get into a little bit of detail around the Filevine product. But we have Dr. Cain Elliott here today, who is the VP of Industry Expansion, and Brock Chambers, who works in strategic partnerships at Filevine. And we are going to talk about technology in the legal world. So welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
I have a couple more introductory comments, if you'd allow me.
So for everyone that's listening, we just had a conversation about how this is probably going to go off the rails, and it already is. So,
well, I had a vision for this call and this podcast to deal with technology and the law. And I think, I want to thank Cain and Brock for attending. They're both from Filevine, which I think very highly of, and I want to talk a lot about their technology there. But we have actually a lot more experience than the way it was just introduced. Cain, in his private practice, was also a chief information officer and director of business intelligence in the private sector. He is a philosopher and a technologist. At University of Penn, he studied nanotechnology and has a PhD in philosophy. And before that, a master's in sociology and a BA in religious studies. So he really brings an interesting, holistic perspective to technology. And I had the pleasure of speaking, I think I was before Cain, thank God, at the conference.
You were.
He was away with his background. We were at the Filevine Legal X conference in Park City.
It was on your birthday, was it not?
It was on my birthday, yeah. It was on my 49th birthday. Yeah, they did a nice celebration, birthday cake for me. It was a really nice surprise. And I got to know all the people there. And I at that time, Cain was not with Filevine. And we troubleshooted the things we like and things that we needed to improve. And it's so good to have him on the inside now, working on the technology. And I want to hear about the innovations. But I want to go through in our discussion with Brock and Cain sort of the pre-COVID era of where technology was as we went into COVID in March. How it's been the last year and where things have, where the pain points have been, and then where do we see the future? And I know we have a lot to talk about the future. So, to kick it off, we're just going to hit into sort of the pre-COVID era, and I'm sort of the technology guru of our firm, and I push our firm into a lot of areas where other firms in my sort of competitive area do not dip their toes in too often. We like to take chances there and, really test the limits of the technology. And we do that with Filevine, of course. But I really saw that opportunity, dozen years ago, even before, to go paperless. Probably, I'm thinking even in 1999 or so, when this technology was just emerging. We were already thinking about paperless and doing that. And so maybe we can start off with just sort of the pre-COVID area, because, a lot of companies were thinking paperless and going into a lot of digital technologies. But maybe we can talk about the positions that Filevine was in and why they had such a great advantage going into COVID.
Well, to start off, I like to think about these things. I think technology is really most interesting when you think about it in terms of longer trajectories and histories, right? So if you look at it just in the very moment you're in, it's very easy to become obsessive about what's the newest trend, the newest hip thing, the next thing. But if we look at a longer trajectory, you can look at professional services and say that, first of all, we know that the legal profession in the post-war era has been one of the professions that lagged behind in technological adoption. And that's not just legal. As you said, professional services writ large, medicine was largely in the same position. And I think it's always been the posture historically that technological innovation, new possibilities with business, what people were doing with tech was always very often something for the next day, something for tomorrow. So I think one of the shifts that we're talking about and seeing is really a perspectival one, that the future became the now, right? That a lot of the things you're talking about became that felt like matters of efficiency became matters of necessity. And so for me, that's the big shift that you see, where people recognize that this isn't about just a convenience. This was about having access to things you had to have and had to take care of for your clients. I know Brock and I, one of the things we've talked about before is that our CEO, Ryan Anderson, made a special point of reminding all of us during the last year and a half, that legal was an essential service, that had to continue for people. And how are we going to continue to support them?
Yeah, it's a good point. And we're driven a lot by our system in Canada is driven by budgets and the court systems. And I'm sure it's the same in the US. The courts, have younger and younger judges, of course, and they're pushing for this technology. And of course, goes to the budgets. The budgets don't allow it. And now that we have this pandemic, our Chief Justice said, we have to have this technology available. I'm actually on the e-hearings committee, and we developed the guidelines for lawyers to use when they do a Zoom call or when they join. They use something called case lines in our system to upload the documents. But, it became the now, as you said. And luckily for our firm, and I know a lot of the firms that you service that that use your technology, they were properly equipped to allow their workers to work from home, to allow the legal services to continue. And I let's just touch on those areas as to what you've noticed from your clients, the law firms that you service, as to were there ones that needed a little bit of a push, or were most of them quite able, like we were, to sort of shift from a centralized group to everyone working remotely?
That's a good question. In the history that I've worked here at Filevine, I started off as a customer success manager, working with clients, face to face, going out to their offices and working with them to help them adopt software. And I would say, there's been a good handful that struggled or didn't necessarily catch the vision of what the technology could do for them, the automation, all the innovation that came along with it. And what ended up happening is we were thrown into it. It was forced upon us with COVID. Everyone had to, go remote. And there were a few firms that did, struggle. But the ultimate thing is we helped them understand what Filevine could do. With it being a cloud-based service, you can work from anywhere. It allows you to have that accessibility. And, you can go back to, the early history of technology. EHR is a good example, the healthcare side, where it became more about having accessibility to your medical records. And the same thing kind of goes to legal today. We need the accessibility for our documents, whether it's electronically, going paperless, saving the money from there. But we did see a lot of people just jump on board because they saw the need for it. And now looking back, a lot of them say we couldn't have done it without Filevine. Without this, we would have struggled. We would have gone out of business. And we're just grateful that we had the opportunity to help them and really guide them on that path to get to where they could really be reliant on that, SaaS setup, that cloud-based system, and not have to jump into these VPNs and have bogged down internet. But could get things done in a speedily fashion.
What would happen to those, Filevine obviously does a CRM service, so client, relationship management, it does document management, it does a whole bunch of services for those who aren't familiar with Filevine. Visit them on the internet, filevine.com. You can learn about it pretty quickly. But what would you do with the customers that were in the midst of migrating their data to you, and they couldn't get to their servers, or how did you manage those crisis situations? Luckily, we had been on your system for a few years, but I imagine those would have been some pain points.
How am I allowed to swear on this?
Of course.
If you can't, we'll bleep it out. We'll bleep it out.
Yeah, that's right. Editing.
No, because in all fairness, there was a lot of wild balancing going on, right? So, one of the things we found ourselves doing was pushing more, for example, for getting people on to get their new cases and material on the platform, start working in there immediately while migrating historical data, for example. All kinds of matching projects like that to keep people functioning and moving, so they didn't stand still. I mean, in Filevine, I'll say this, we probably don't have more love for any term or concept in the world than a force function. It's kind of one of the ways we live, that when something hits and requires change, you can either react and do something about it, or, proactively do something before that hits. But once it hits, you got to make it work. So I would say there was a lot of juggling going on, and a lot of credit goes to our data migration teams and ops teams who are keeping all those things in the balance, which was, I think, the interesting part about this was it was not just a technical balance, not just a fiscal balance, not just the operational balance, but I think one thing this year taught us a lot was how all those processes are intertwined with a lot of psychological processes. Everybody was under an immense amount of stress and different kinds of stressors. And so there was a lot of humanity on the table along with all of the work that had to be done.
Right.
I just sorry, Charles. Can I?
Yeah, go ahead, Brenda.
You guys, I'll only get little chances to ask questions, so I'm just going to ask it now. But I am curious as you're talking, again, recognizing that we were, as Charles said, we were a little bit ahead of the curve, a lot ahead of the curve. Charles walks around with a big Filevine sign for you guys who haven't seen it. He loves it. He has like a tracksuit.
I'm wearing the socks.
Right.
It's a tracksuit. I want that.
Yeah. We're fully branded. And then, you've talked about those firms that were like, okay, the light bulb went on, holy moly, we're in a pandemic, we need to get on board. But did you still find that there were firms that were like, we're good, we don't need to do this? Were there people who were just so reluctant, or so, maybe it's not reluctant, but just so unable to embrace the technology that they weren't able to do that and make that switch? Because that's
I think more from that human side. I think what we did see was we saw plenty of firms that were like, well, 3 months from now, so maybe we don't have to accelerate, because maybe 3 months from now it will be, and then 6 months are in, and okay, but maybe 3 months from now, maybe we don't have to accelerate. There were some people who did that posture. Although, again, I would say genuinely, that wasn't anything particular to legal, right? In the sense that it was kind of within their business, making some of the same kinds of motions that you could see in every society that was happening, that people just were so desperate for return to norm that hoping that would happen. And so we did see firms that were saying, do we have to accelerate with this? Because won't it resolve itself in some period of time? And is that continually proven not to be the case? That did change some of those minds.
Sure. Fair enough.
So let's look at the pre-COVID era and what technologies law firms used, and sort of walk through that progression. So, like, if I talk about the kinds of things I was interested in pre-COVID, I was trying to get onto, the VoIP phone, which ended up being Zoom for us. We used the Zoom phone and the Zoom video service. I think you guys were using the Zoom VoIP originally, so that's probably where I got the idea from. We obviously use legal research. Thomson Reuters has all those platforms we use. We got Filevine going for our CRM. We were using a different document solution, which we've now had some pain points with, and we're pushing it into Filevine because you've now expanded your document management, but that's during COVID. We were starting to consider outsourcing medical record retrieval. We had your system for after hours reception, Ringbird, which you guys offer. Some web calls, like answering your website, texting with the website. And I think that would be pretty much it in terms of, obviously we have online faxing and things, those kinds of solutions, digital faxing. But where did you see sort of the legal industry? I know you obviously talked about the court system in its archaic form, but where would it have gone no COVID occurring? Where was, in your mind, were things progressing at that point? If we have to rewind the clock, or what other services have I missed that you could think of?
It's interesting, and I'll kind of answer that in a way of, I think we were still, legal was heading in the same direction we're going now. Going digital, having that opportunity for those online legal platforms. I mean, that's really how, as you know, Charles, Filevine came to be. It was Ryan and his partners. They needed something that worked for what they were trying to accomplish, and they weren't finding it. And ultimately, Filevine was born. I think what COVID did really is just sped it up. I mean, it went 10, 20 times faster than I think we anticipated. But I think we were heading in that trajectory. I don't know, Cain, if you agree with that or not, but that's kind of how I envisioned it. It just sped it up at this point.
Yeah, I think, well, there's one piece of tech that I'm thinking about that people were thinking about, talking about, not sure about in legal, that I think just COVID just closed the door on, you have to do this for a lot of firms. And that would be chat. And interactions, like in Filevine when you task, or if you use chat like in a Slack, which we use Slack internally, or if you use Ring Central Chat or Teams or whatever it may be.
We use the Zoom chat.
Right.
Yeah. We have Zoom phone.
Yeah. And I think that I've always said that in every firm that I've talked to, there's such a history and tradition associated in legal with the paper, right? And there's this big break. Can you get off of your addiction to paper, which I think all of us have, at least of a certain age. I mean, we have enough employees of a younger age in Filevine that don't have that addiction, but I still have it to paper, right? And then there's a move to digitizing that. And then email was like the final frontier. But I think email is a kind of its own special hell for everybody in 2020 and 2021, and anybody who's living right now and working in any space. And then there's a move to chat and text and other forms. And I think for a lot of firms, text and chat felt like a really revolutionary front. And I think that COVID really changed the feeling about that. I think that that's different when you can't tap on somebody down the hall, when you're not just shouting out to your colleague down the corner or walking down to their cubby or office or whatever it may be. I think that changed people's perception of chat in quite a profound way.
It's a great point. And it took a long time to get our culture to accept the different forms of chat, because we have a WhatsApp chat for social. We have texting in Zoom, which allows us to do work-related stuff like let me know when you're off the phone, or can you book this meeting? Maybe it's not file-related, and then everything file-related goes in Filevine. But, the obsession with emailing, because it would be a knee-jerk reaction. You get a joke and you send it around the email and you get an all staff, and it's like, oh, you're cluttered with a 50 or 60 unnecessary emails. And not only that, but sending any kind of digital link in an email is very dangerous because of the phishing schemes and the hacking that goes on. And, so to teach the staff to get out of Outlook, which is so hackable, and get them into Zoom, Filevine, and WhatsApp as your form of communication was quite an onerous task. Took a good 6 months to train them. But I think we're getting better. And the best tool that you guys came up with was integrating Outlook with Filevine. So now, even if you're tempted to start that conversation in an email, you can just attach it to the project and right there change the conversation to a Filevine conversation, which I love.
Yeah.
That's genius.
We're getting there.
So Brenda's like cracking up.
Because I'm like, I love email. I'm sorry. I still make lists for the grocery store on a piece of paper.
As I always say, everyone's entitled to their own perversions, and you're entitled to there's no judgment in this chat.
But you know what? I think security is a good conversation, and I know it's a serious one, but we've had so much going on during COVID about, these phishing schemes, and you hear all these ransomware and they're demanding Bitcoins, and they've got your data locked up. And so maybe to reassure all your clients, we can do a deep dive into Filevine's security protocol and how we can feel secure about the data on a cloud system that we don't have control of.
I'll kind of let Cain take that. I mean, he's very knowledgeable on it. But I mean, I will say Filevine takes it seriously. I remember, I would get an email and it was just a test from internal. And if I accidentally clicked a link, it's like, hey, you got to learn how to watch for these phishing schemes and take a test and really make sure that everyone here as an employee was very much aware of these phishing scams and kind of what to look for and identify those so that we could in turn help our clients. But I mean, our organization takes security extremely seriously. And I think Cain's a little more in touch with that because he has those conversations internally that he can dive into it in a little more detail.
Well, yeah, I would just say, without getting technical for the audience, but I think what's important to remember is that, look, as they like to say, the angles and vectors of attack keep growing all the time. So just like we talked about all the different platforms and types of technology people are using, you can think of each of those as a potential entry point into the organization. So as those keep expanding and the number of potential threats keep expanding because the sophistication of people wanting to get into this data keeps growing, the pool of people who might have access to technology to do that keeps growing. I think what's really key and important and part of the overall strategy, not just of Filevine, but a lot of providers in the space, is to say, look, we are going to be on a public cloud platform. And part of the reason why we're doing that is because we're essentially pooling security resources with other organizations that are on that cloud platform in a way that your organization, your firm never could individually, in a way that even Filevine couldn't individually, and that you're going to have extra layers of protection that come from all of those other people using that public cloud and the security resources they're providing, as well as our dedicated security team that are tracking that as well. And so I think what's really important to remember is, the best form of protection is to make sure that somebody wants to go and knock on the next door, not yours. And that is really the key of pooling those security resources to make sure we're optimizing that for our users and for everybody using the platform. I think any platform that would go out today in 2021 and say, we're immune to any kind of action being taken against our platform, that's not true. That's not a thing. I would hope nobody's even putting that on marketing stuff in any organization in 2021. There isn't such a thing. What you're doing is you're preparing for how to protect the everyday, doing your best to prepare for the dark day, and then, everything you can that's best practices, assuming something nasty and nefarious is happening. And that's the kind of posture we take. Assume something is amiss, askew, awry, and be looking for it all the time. And what I would tell individual firms to do, if anybody's listening, don't try to watch everything going on in your organization. That's the point where you've become obsessed with security and very inefficient at it and will have no ability to control it. As I always tell everybody, look for outliers, things that don't seem to belong. Don't pace around thinking about every action that's taken. You simply can't do that. But look for outliers, things that seem like unusual or exceptional behavior that you don't expect. Did somebody download a massive number of documents larger than you would expect? That might raise a flag, either that there was something going on with security or they're making a lateral candidate move to a different There are all kinds of things that come out of that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I know you guys offer dual authentication, which we mandate, and I have like a list that keeps track and makes sure that everyone's doing the dual authentication. I know that there's ways to clone people's cell phones, and I guess that's only one layer of protection. Do you have plans for any kind of other biometric features that would allow other security controls for the user? Do you know about that?
If I did,
those would be new features.
Yeah, but I would say this. I think the entire tech industry is moving to different ways to look beyond the level of the password, right? Because everybody knows the vulnerability of password. Everybody knows the fact that passwords are reused everywhere. That's a known quantity, or hopefully a known quantity in 2021. And I think the entire industry is shifting to some different modes of authenticating beyond passwords. That's certainly something that Filevine and the rest of the tech community is invested in.
Well, that's good. So now during COVID, obviously, a lot of services for many of the legal firms in our market, and I'm sure it's around the world, had to think about how to do things different if you can't come to the office. So banking had to be done. We had to figure out how to get our banking done in a e-transfer way versus going to the bank and doing checking. We switched our faxing to digital faxing. Obviously, we're dependent on users at home and their internet hookups. So, what's the power of their internet and how good is your services? Like we've found that certain programs within Citrix were very problematic in even Outlook from someone's home. Luckily, Filevine has been pretty functional. And I don't know if you have comments about during COVID, what pain points you've noticed with firms trying to work remotely with their internet connections or with banking or other solutions that they're trying to bring in.
I think it just kind of runs in the same theme. Is their internet good? Sometimes you want to point the blame at, a system, but typically it's what we find common denominator is internet. Tends to be
a lot of people, as Brock knows, a lot of people though found that their internet at home looked very different.
Absolutely.
As opposed to the 9 p.m. to 12 p.m. of like, I'm going to get this work done versus 8 a.m. and someone else is in the house wanting to stream Netflix at the same time. I want all the bandwidth for work and I want to be on a Zoom at the same time. Their bandwidth at home started looking very different. I agree with the remark of the current president just made that I saw on Twitter yesterday, which was that, the internet and our bandwidth is infrastructure. Mm-hmm. And it's core infrastructure. And I think that firms are now seeing that bandwidth availability is core infrastructure. It's not an IT nicety or something your technical team tells you, wouldn't it be nice to have more bandwidth? No, it's part of the core of running your business in the current era. I think, and one thing I think Brock's team, actually, you guys did a really good job of facilitating this, but something new I was seeing that wasn't something that was necessarily everybody was jumping on before, but it speaks, Charles, to what you were talking about, which is that I saw a lot more interest in remote mailroom activity. That was something that was kind of people were just touching on before the pandemic. And then, as you said, became much more interesting because you didn't want people going in every day and picking up the mail. Right. So I think that was something new too that popped up more often.
Yeah, and I think we've got a bunch of offices around the province, and we noticed that their internet provider, like we have a dedicated line that comes in. It's like cemented into our boardroom. So we have a private line, whatever it is, like very high speed. And we were noticing in the remote offices that they're just hooked up to the local phone provider. And those providers sell two different services. If you get the residential service contract, it's a download-based system, not an upload-based system, versus a business line, which has a very heavy upload ability. And that's what we were noticing with these other offices is they are having all sorts of technical glitches because they can't upload at the speed that they're supposed to because they're not getting a business contract. They've got residential services, which a lot of people I don't think know about. They just want the cheapest internet for the fastest and they get, the basic download package. So I think that
I think a lot of offices or employees that were outside of metropolitan or cities proper, they were the first to see that because a lot of those residential services do have those upload rate caps on them. And that suddenly, when you're trying to work through documents, upload them, that suddenly becomes, especially like I said, when you're on a video call at the same time, that's when it would come up.
So let's get to the more exciting stuff of post-COVID and the vision of the future in legal services. I think this is the most exciting talk. And how, sort of artificial intelligence affects the legal industry. We've seen, the basics of artificial intelligence with Alexa and Siri. And, we've seen it in terms of translation services and transcription. I know the big buzzword that they talk about is labeling data. That's what Elon Musk is talking about when he talks about self-driving cars. They got to label everything. How does this get into the legal industry, and where does all this labeling help us?
I think there's going to be a couple of things. So let me give you a couple slogans that I see happening. And if our product team doesn't agree, then I'm in trouble. But we can, as Musk said it, we can edit and post, right? So I'll tell you what, because I think it's a little bit, some of this is going to be back to the future kind of action, and I think that will be exciting. So one of my personal obsessions is I think dictation is back, baby. I think dictation is going to make a big comeback. I think you're going to find in professional services that it'll become easier and easier in the platforms we work in to actually dictate to them. I think that's something we see people doing right now in Filevine fields. For example, when they're working remotely, they will dictate into text fields and boxes and things using a Siri or their Google Assistant or whatever. But I think you're going to see a lot more of that kind of activity where we're going to be looking for voice responsive and command responsive, but in a way that's much more protected for business. So I think that the issue we've seen so far is that the first major releases of these technologies, like you said with digital assistants, Charles, all those have been into big sweeps of public data where that's all going in. And those are obviously not the places where you want to house secure legal data, but I think we're going to see that influence of all of the eruption of technology that's come out of that infused into other things we use. And the other thing I think where you'll see it is, especially in the area that's usually referred to as RPA, the robotic process automation, I think that domain where there are a lot of repeatable tasks that can be trained and performed, just like in the same way you used to record a macro, in a Word document or an Excel, you're going to see that, but at a much more sophisticated level in platforms like Filevine. Those are all two highlights of what I think is going to be coming down the pipeline.
As you were talking, Cain, can I ask you a question? And this is completely probably out of left field for most people, but for me, it's the first thing that came to mind. But when, and you'll understand when I say it, but when we started to see everybody move into this remote opportunity for working in school and things like that, one of the populations that really struggled was the disabled population, because it's difficult for them to, a lot of people with mobility issues or with speech issues, to access technology, to be proficient with technology. As you're talking about dictation, I'm like, that's awesome. And I love the idea of more, talk to text and things like that. But when you think about people who are dysarthric or people who have speech issues or even just really heavy accents, and a lot of the technology out there is not able to properly pick that up and say that properly. And so where I'm going with this, though, is, specific maybe even to your product, did you have to take a lot of that into consideration and some of the changes or some of the adaptations you had to make in order to make your product more accessible for those with disabilities who needed to access it, with everything going so remotely?
Yeah, no, I'm actually really glad you asked that, because this is a kind of point of regular conversation between myself and Ryan Anderson, the CEO. The way we're trying to think about it and what we're looking at of the future of the platform and the UI, the UX, the user interface that people use, we really want to make sure we break down any barrier between an accessibility version or accessible form of Filevine and Filevine as such. I think there's a long history in all kinds of technology of saying, here's an accessible form, here's the product as such. And what everybody is figuring out is that what's really important is that accessibility is really about fully accessible for everybody who's on the platform. Mm-hmm. So I think it has to be infused right at the root level of how you're approaching the future of the platform and what we're doing. And I think because that can appear in so many myriad of ways, it's not enough just to say we'll add this piece or we'll add that piece, but really try to holistically address that. And I know that the team who's working on future iterations of our UI and UX, that's part of their objective of what they're doing to make sure that's infused into every part of the platform.
Amazing. Thank you.
I know the state of Arizona has now allowed legal services to be run by a non-lawyer owned organization. So we call these alternative business structures. And Canada has had their own entrant into this area. We do it with nonprofits. Australia had it. A
lot of the Commonwealth is
they have publicly traded law firms, which you can buy shares in and invest in class actions and things like that. But we see a future where you're going to go to Google and say, how do I make a will? And they're going to do it for you through a computer and automation. There's legal services being offered out of Palo Alto already. Where do you see this going? And do you guys talk about this in Filevine world, or is this just, this is what's happening all around us? And are we all going to turn into tech people in the future? That's the only way we'll exist as lawyers.
No, I'm obsessed with this question because I think this is exactly the point of, what platforms like Filevine have to do is have to enable what is the most likely outcome, in my opinion, at least the way I read what's going on in not just legal, but in this case, particularly in the legal world, is that there will be the standard, I believe, will become hybrid. It will. I don't think we're talking for quite a long time about replacement of legal services by machine learning services. I don't see that. Do I see that you could have a reduction in the scope of some of those legal services provided by humans? Absolutely. And if you don't see that coming, it's going to hit you really fast and really hard. But that's in every industry. What I think we have to be on the front lines of preparing for is how do you offer better hybrid services that are some kind of combination of pieces where you can automate a piece of what's going on and provide a true human review that's looking out for interests that go beyond what's algorithmically considered to be optimal. There's I think it's interesting, because computers are not very good at risk-taking behavior. They're not very good at that idea, right? There's essentially percentages that can be associated, and as you said, Charles, you label, and as much as you label, then you're adjudicating different risks based on percentages, right? But there is going to be still room for human action that has that kind of intuitive feel of this is the place to take this risk for this client. This is the place to step forward and go ahead and do that. And no matter how much you label the entirety of the data set, you won't come up, I believe, with some kind of perfected algorithm to know when to take that risk and step forward. And I think that's where you're going to see, maybe you'd have a model that would tell you when you need to try and take this to trial instead of settle. It'll give you a percentage.
Or maybe still going to sign a waiver that says, what percentage of risk they're willing to.
Mm-hmm. Precisely. But then there's still going to be that place where you're going to want someone advocating to say, this looks like the percentage, but I think that the case is here, it's right, and I think it's in your best interest to move forward. So I think it'll be a hybrid is the more likely outcome.
No, I think it's an exciting area. We use it actually with research. We have legal research companies that are a hybrid already. They do a formulated response, and then they have a lawyer review it, and it's sort of like a first edit of a factum. We've outsourced medical documents for summaries. I don't think those are automated. They're more like outsourced to another country that has it at a cheaper rate. So we've done that.
The insurance companies are working hard on that one, though.
Yeah, I know. I think that'd be a great service for all of us, right? I mean, who wants to sit through and summarize records all the time? I mean, it gets to be tedious. Just wanted to go back to one other area. So where I really love where AI is right now is on analytics. So you integrate with Domo, which I love. And that's part of your package when you sign up with Filevine. You get these Domo charts that analyze your data, which used to take me days to do on spreadsheets when I would download it and then sort it and figure out my own charts. Now I got 30 charts popping up at a moment's notice, analyzing everything that goes on in the firm. And I presume that's all happening in the background with computers and labeling. And I've met with another company that's looking at market share analytics, where you could ask them a question like, how many accidents were in Canada yesterday, or how many firms do this kind of work, and you can find out your market share. Do you guys see that relationship with Domo and use it to your own advantage for, have you thought about how AI can help you in market analytics that way?
Yeah. We have a team member running an internal business intelligence unit that runs. I'm pointing across the way. He and I share an alcove, but no, that's exactly what he's running machine learning models on that all the time. And I think what we're trying to push for there, Charles, to that point is, I think what everybody wants to do in legal in the space is move in the direction that you're identifying, which is in business, the big move is to go beyond just business intelligence that looks retroactively at your data set to move more towards the analytics models that look predictively at what's coming. And that's actually what he does all day.
That's wild. I love that stuff.
I know, Charles loves charts.
What I'm really missing is the assistant that can deal with, like, there should be some automation with scheduling. That's probably one of our biggest pain points, is getting 6 lawyers to agree on a time to even have a call, or a time to have a pretrial, or a time to have a mediation, or whatever it is you're scheduling. And I know Brenda's trying to schedule all sorts of marketing events, and you got to go to each person's assistant. They all have their rules with their calendars. And I don't know. I know you guys have improved on your calendar, but I don't know if that's a function you see down the road of putting some AI behind it to help schedule events between various offices.
Yeah, human coordination. Well, here's what I'd say. Yes, but there's always a limit that on the other side of these other humans.
Yeah.
And so coordination still remains something that somebody may have an open block at 4 p.m. on their calendar, but they don't like to take those calls at 4 p.m.
Right.
So there is a kind of limit function that all of us running on wetware instead of hardware still have in the system, in the sense that there's a lot of preference that goes in there that's pretty hard to teach a machine. Now, over time, teaching machines about preferences, can they learn those? Yes, absolutely. But is there a lot of mess that's introduced because it involves all of us? For sure.
Right.
So it's a labeling thing. Like, there is some apps out there. I think I tried Calendly, one of them. You've got to label every block in your calendar to say, this is my lunch break. This is when I start work. This is when I end work. Mm-hmm. And then, it sends out a bunch of options to the other side. But it's still a difficult.
It's an endless exercise, I think, in human foible.
Yeah,
that's the way I see it. At least for the foreseeable future.
Right. Well, are there any other topics that I haven't raised? I know, Brenda, you have a few other questions. Do you want to jump in?
Well, I mean, I just, I'm listening to you talk, and I think one of the things that's come up for me, and you've addressed it a little bit about what the future looks like, but we keep hearing people talk in general about the new normal. And I don't even know what that means anymore, but they just talk about that, whether that be for personal, whether that be for industry, whether that be. So, given how much you've seen things change from a technology perspective during the pandemic, what do you think things are going to look like as we move forward? What does that new normal look like? Taking specifically the legal world, and what is that? What is that? I don't know. What does that look like moving forward now that you've had some of these things that you've had to discover during this period of time?
I think that's almost tough to say. What is the new normal? It's hard to predict that future. Cain might be able to do it because he's a genius, but the reality of it is, it's tough to say because we're all at a different pace.
Right.
For us, I think, ideally with the technology side of things, we're going to see that hybrid ability of remote work, in-office work. And speaking with clients and individuals outside of the legal industry that are in that real estate space, they're finding, people just aren't interested in it anymore. And so they're looking at different avenues to kind of generate opportunities and have those alternate businesses. I think it really just it's almost too tough to say. And if we had those predictive analytics, can really look into the future with that machine learning, we might have a totally different conversation going. But it's tough to, in my opinion, to say what that new normal is going to look like, because it's too cloudy to really see through.
I think, Cain, go ahead and jump in, because then I had a comment, but go ahead.
Well, if I had to just be speculative here, in the same way that I said maybe new technology like enhanced machine learning would bring back some old tech like dictation, I do wonder too if, when everybody says the new normal, I do wonder too if what we're going to be looking for too is especially ways that technology can help re-enchant and enhance the ways we interacted before. So I would say that maybe if you look at it as, if somebody says the new normal is everything's going to be remote.
Yeah.
Bullshit.
Right. Yeah.
Bullshit. But if you say, would the new normal be helping to break down barriers between that remote and in person and make that a more pliable and flexible world that we're in between those? Sure. Do I think people will be looking for technology, though, to enhance the interpersonal relations and things going on in the office? Yeah, I do. I mean, I think that seems to me much more plausible than everybody makes a radical shift in the reality.
Agree.
Yeah, I know the courts for the e-hearings committee expects this sort of Zoom world to continue. There will be hybrid hearings. There will be virtual hearings. There's this sort of term telepresence that, there's always going to be the option of attending a meeting by video. And so there'll be sort of the partial in-person, partial by video. And you've almost got to have the technology in every space to be prepared for that. I, as an owner of a practice, worry about all the space I'm renting and whether it's going to be filled. I got a real estate sort of newsletter that said 70% in the legal services plan to have some flexibility with remote work. Now, whether that means coming in 2 days a week, or because in Toronto, it's hard to commute here. There's people that commute 2 hours each way to come from a far off, another city to make it into Toronto. That's a lot of travel time. I mean, obviously, they much prefer to be able to have the option to work from home. Yeah. But again, there's all that collaboration that's hard to do when you're looking at a screen all the time, where you could go for lunch and you can chat and you could do stuff a bit off, whatever, when you're not staring at the screen. You get tired looking at the screen all the time. So I think there's going to be we're going to have to find that right balance, but I don't know what to do with all the office space. I don't know what anyone's going to do.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think about, and you mentioned, and I agree with you, Cain, I don't think, it's going to be, fully one way where it's going to be completely remote. Everyone does everything. I like the idea. I'm getting tired of the word hybrid, but I like the idea of the hybrid. And the reason I do like that is because I do think it does allow for, again, if I look at things just from a general accessibility perspective, it allows people who may not have been able to travel into the city, or people who may not be able to come in for a meeting, whatever that might be, that they can do that, whether that be client, whether that be, the professional. But, I don't want to see it start to replace, there's so many nuances, especially I think in this world. I mean, I think about the clients that we serve, and I think about the advocacy piece, and I think about the emotional piece, and I think about that. I mean, we are advocating for, some people who have been through such catastrophic events and such, and when we get up there and we, are mediating or we're fighting on their behalf, I mean, I think there's a lot to be lost by not being in person.
Right.
And, I don't want to see that go away. If it's an opportunity, again, to allow someone to participate who would not normally be able to do that. But I don't want to see people say, well, why are we even bothering in person when we can do this, remotely? Because you just lose, in my opinion, you lose that piece. And I'm hoping that, people remember that as we move forward with all this.
Yeah, I think what people are looking for, though, right, is just to find a balance between the practices, processes, and things we have to do, to your point about accessibility, that are fit to life, rather than life being morphed and shaped around that, Charles, just like you were saying about commute. And so I think part of this has just been a realization of, look, these things need to continue and function. We need to be able to function and work if there are changes like this. But it doesn't mean we want to overhaul the entirety of existence on the basis of that. Nor does it mean we can be as afraid of stepping forward into new kinds of adventures that involve different modes of interaction. But like I said, just as I was saying, putting pressure on the interactions, I think something like when people talk about Zoom fatigue, that's the signal for everybody in tech that the next frontier is find more tactile, interesting, and innovative ways to make remote interactions more involving. I think
we could be holograms.
We're going to Star Wars.
Yeah. I mean, rather than all of us just saying, hey, well, we're fatigued, let's just be tired of it.
Right.
That should be a charge to all of us to innovate on the ways we're doing things and get excited about different ways to interact. When you face a wall like that, you can give up on interaction, but that doesn't feel very affirming. It seems like a more interesting way would be to say, how do we do this but do it better?
Yeah. Because I definitely don't want Charles hologramming into my living room.
None of us want that.
All of a sudden, I'm like, well, where'd you come from?
It's been challenging. We've onboarded 3 practices, right, for our firm. Many, many new staff. We've trained them all via Zoom on Filevine and other technologies. And, it works, right?
Yes.
It has worked. There's cost savings that is, really helps businesses make this work and helps them innovate because they save money elsewhere. So those all have to be factored in. If I have to travel 4 hours for a 1 hour hearing, do I want to do that way, or do I want to do it through Zoom? And, it's going to be hard when, you have half. You can't have someone attend and the other one on video because that's a disadvantage.
Right.
So it has to be everyone on video or everyone in person.
Yeah.
And insurers are going to be reluctant to attend because they can be so productive. They always find the hearings way too long and a waste of their time. They just want to give the authority to their lawyer, and so they can be attending as they need it. Yeah. So, to Brenda's point, is that really a process that feels cathartic for the victim? It is tough for the victim to attend. There's a lot of emotion being in the same room as the person who caused the accident or whatever it was, or having to give evidence in a face-to-face fashion. It's probably easier to do it on video. Mm-hmm. But is it cathartic enough? Do you feel like you were saved through the process? At least you're accommodated. You're in your own home. Things like that can be respected. So it's going to be interesting to see where it goes. I think there's going to be more remote working and more remote hearings and video conferences than people expect. It's not going to be all that way, but it could be 50% in any way.
Right.
Yeah.
Like there's still a lot of community learning to do.
Yes.
I mean, it's everybody's feeling like, well, this went on so long. What are all the lessons learned? And I'm just sitting back thinking, this is a blink of an eye. We just got started on this adventure.
It's not over yet.
No.
It's, the adventure of different ways of relating to one another and being humans, which hopefully doesn't stop. But we're not going to learn all those lessons in a year. And if we think we did, well, there's going to be something yet to learn. Always is.
That's right. Well, any final words, any words of wisdom, anything else that you can pass on to us about, where nanotechnology?
Yeah, I was going to say, there's got to be something. I mean, the only part I related to there is sociology, because, that's obviously what I got a BA in, because what else was I going to do? So I feel like I'm connected to you in that way. But then the nano piece, I don't. So, yeah.
Listen, the only thing, whatever you see in the movies, don't worry about so much. That's all I would say. But thank you guys very much.
It's not all Black Mirror.
No. But that is tremendously well done. But don't worry about so much about the TV shows. Worry about your neighbors. Worry about the people down the street, the people in your cities and communities. Take care of them first. And if you can take care of them, we'll figure out the technology part.
Yeah, I agree.
Sounds good. Brenda, are you going to do your drill of questions?
Yeah, I could do my drill of questions.
We have it's a Buttertorts tradition to ask you your preferences between one or the other. So Brenda's going to shoot through the list. Yeah.
So I don't know.
You both to answer.
I feel like I have it memorized now. I may miss one or two, but that's okay. Okay. So these are just random questions. This is how we finish them off. We finished off our podcast for people we haven't interviewed before. So here we go. Dog or cat?
Dog.
Cat.
Okay.
No.
This is going to be awesome. Beer or wine?
Ooh,
beer.
Wine. Okay.
Beach or forest?
Forest.
Okay. All right, guys. Hockey or baseball?
Hockey.
Baseball. Sorry.
Oh, Brock, you're hired.
This is a podcast.
You can tell who's on the partnership team, by the way.
Wait, Canada, hockey. Yeah. Basketball or football?
Football.
No.
Perfect answer, Cain.
Okay. City or country?
Country.
City.
Oh, you guys, I don't think you should work together anymore.
It's the differences that make us the great.
That's true.
There you go.
That's true.
Opposites attract.
Chips or chocolate?
Chips or chocolate? Ooh, can I
chocolate.
say both?
I say both.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's fine. You can do that. You can have a foot in each boat. That's not a problem.
Yeah, that's why I have to say both.
Yeah, okay. iOS or Android?
iOS.
Android.
Really? Wow.
Because he can control it.
I feel like I was going to say.
Wild is some wild.
And
I was gonna say-
Android people.
I feel like there's something to take from that. Like if Cain is saying Android, I think I got to look into that.
But Mac OS, not Windows. So
Okay. Right. Okay. Fair enough. Which one am I missing here? I usually have these. There's one more that bath or shower.
Shower.
bath.
Bath all the way. Yes. Bath all the way. You can get so much, like it's just productive. You can read. You can, shower. I don't know. Yeah. I'm with you.
5 minutes in and you're out.
Now, this is a kind of a Canadian question because I don't know down there the prevalence of people who eat butter tarts. Do you guys have butter tarts down there? Do you know what a butter tart is?
No.
No. Okay. So we'll have to send some down to you. Well, no, because, so I think it really comes down to the question that we always ask for people here who are familiar with butter tarts is if they like their butter tarts with raisins or without. So the question really comes down to, do you like cooked raisins or do you not like cooked raisins? Think about that.
Butter tart is a tiny pastry filled with
caramelly kind of
caramel and butter.
Yeah.
But it's cooked and it's delicious.
Right? It's brown sugar on the Google.
Yes.
Yeah. But so there's people that are in different.
You had it when you were in the Northeast.
We'll send you guys some. Charles is an outlier because usually they come with raisins or without. And then you ask Charles and he's like, with pecans. We're like, that wasn't the question.
Oh yeah, I love
it. So anyways, so maybe we'll have to send them to you and then re-ask the question.
That's fair.
I'd go without the raisins.
Okay. Okay, good. Okay, that's good because I can't have the raisins.
They're purist.
Yeah. Well, there's something about biting into that. You don't expect that. And then there it is.
Yeah, it's like biting into an oatmeal cookie thinking
Do you put raisins in your oatmeal?
Brock just had a perfect example. So you think it's an oatmeal chocolate chip, and then you bite in, it's a raisin. There's nothing worse than that.
Depressing moment.
That ruins my day.
I'm thinking, no, it's because I've got that meme stuck in my head. I don't know if you saw it where it said beef jerky is just a cow raisin. And after that,
I have not seen that, but now I need to look it up.
Yeah, I gotta look that one up.
I still like it, so I'm gonna eat it no matter what.
Okay, and then so the final question is, and it doesn't have to be complicated, but what would you classify as your favorite meal? If you could have anything, last meal, whatever it might be, what's your favorite meal?
A hearty meal, a rack of ribs, and a baked potato.
Oh, nice. Oh. Okay.
I was just going to go with a pizza.
Really?
Just comfort in a box. It's comfort in a box.
Like deep dish, thin, New York style. Like, what are you thinking?
More like a New York style.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. The nice thin,
thin crust. Yeah.
Very
good, guys.
And that's it. That's how we wrap it up.
Yeah. It's great to talk to you both. Thanks for doing it.
You guys are amazing. Really thank you so much. All right. Thanks, guys. Take care.